This past weekend, I had the pleasure of visiting Prism Games Chicago, my friendly local game store, for their Daggerheart launch event. So today, I wanted to not only give my initial thoughts on the Daggerheart system from a player's perspective, but also, since I am a known tinkerer, experimenter, woman of science, and world-class thief, I'm going to talk about which mechanic I'd gleefully pilfer and smuggle back into my D&D games at home. So, first impression? I had a blast. My DM James did a great job, the other players at my table were delightful, and overall, I really liked the choices that the design team made with the system. Now, before we start, an important caveat. I'm not someone out here who's auditioning systems like it's the RPG Bachelor, although that would be fun. But I'm not playing systems to look for my one true soulmate. So none of this is ever going to be about replacing anything. Just like board games, I like to play a ton of different systems because I just like TTRPGs. And just like board games, house rules can be a lot of fun. So if you're already keying up with, why steal when you can just play blank? Scram, shoo fly, gone get. Let me and my friends have fun playing with different mechanics and creating little Franken systems as we please. Because boy oh boy am I going to do it regardless of whatever base system that I start with. Now that I got that out of the way, what about Daggerheart stood out to me? I don't think this should come as a surprise to anyone, but this system is less optimization oriented and more cinematic drama story beat oriented. But it also wasn't as loosey-goosey as haters would have you believe. So some of the things I really liked about this system include card-based character building. I love a good visual aid. Pretty much every magic item I've ever created comes with cute little handouts for my players. So I love that Daggerheart's cards are not only beautiful, the artwork is insane, but it actually helps make character creation a lot more modular in a way that feels really freeing. Their system doesn't punish more funky or less traditional character concepts, so you don't really feel stupid for not picking the prescribed optimal combinations of classes, ancestries, communities. And while I still feel like there's probably room for making min-maxed combinations, I really appreciate that the way they set this up makes it so that roleplay flavor and mechanical flavor don't really end up being one and the same. That means I can have a Ridgeborn Fawn Guardian and still have fun playing them, instead of feeling silly for not picking something like a Half-Orc or a Goliath as my ancestry. I don't think either of those options, I was just giving that as an example. And Ginny D actually just made a whole video on the character creation process for this, so I'll link to it below in case you want a more in-depth look at what character creation looks like. Then there's experiences. I love experiences, both in-game and in real life. Disclaimer though, I'm a big fan of the Fate RPG system. For whatever reason, it gets a ton of hate. I love it. Not a popular opinion, but experiences felt like a little nibble of Fate's aspects and skills if you're familiar with those. And for this event, I played a pre-gen character, and my experiences were Royal Mage and not on my watch. So that means if I can find a way to bring these experiences into roleplay and spend a hope point, I'll get to those in a second, I can get a bonus to my roll. And for Marlowe, I especially feel like with the combination of class, ancestry, community that she had, you already get a cohesive idea of who this character is when you combine it with experiences. Like, this is definitely a PC who's haughty, who's nosy, and I love getting to come up with ways to roleplay these sorts of little traits to get that bonus. So this is a small thing, but I feel like it's one of those choices that they made with Daggerheart that makes storytelling really pop. So big fan of experiences. The 2d12 system. I'm a notoriously low roller. Like, I've had DMs sit there and watch me roll stats before and still be like, no, we're not doing that. So I really love not only the gentler roll distribution that comes with 2d12s versus 1d20, but also I really love that Daggerheart seemed to want to do this to help DMs take the concept of success and degrees of success and mash it into one big thing. So when you roll for something, you roll your 2d12s. One dice represents hope, the other dice represents fear. And this means that you're still trying to hit a DC, but depending on which dice rolls the higher number, you can succeed with fear or you can fail with hope. Doing it every day. Which brings me to my next thing. Hope and fear points. I really like hope points. I like that they're baked right into the system. One of my continuous failures as a GM is that I constantly forget about inspiration. I almost never hand it out. My players do so many cool things, but my brain can only focus on so much at one time. Little pea brain. So I really think it's great that Daggerheart chose to do something that didn't involve the GMs remembering to hand something out. And they also gave players different and interesting ways to spend these hope points across the board. And I know GMs get to do things with fear points, so I'm definitely looking forward to learning about what that looks like later on. And just to be nitpicky, of course, there were some things I liked less. On my first go around, there wasn't anything major that I noticed, to be honest. And actually, I'm someone who's pretty easy to please. I just really like games. I promise I'm always having the best time. But there were some things I kind of lingered on a little bit while I was playing. One of those things was dice bloat. It kind of feels like you need a decent amount of dice for this game. If we're getting technical, the only thing you truly need is one very distinct d12 for your hope and fear rolls, but I can see wanting distinct advantage and disadvantage d6s for more visual players, and my spells and abilities all kind of use different dice. And some spells let you use hope points to basically upcast. So some spells might involve rolling a d8 several times. So I know most people usually like to roll like their little handful of d8s, yada yada yada. And look, I know this one is definitely personal preference. I'm perfectly aware that I don't need 3 d8s to roll. I can roll 1 d8 3 times. I know. And this type of dice bloat is in no way unique to Daggerheart by any means. It's also significantly less of an issue if you primarily play online, or if you have a dice goblin friend in your group that's willing to share their dice. But it is something I do think about because I have a tendency to bring a lot of first-time players into my tables. I really love spreading the joy of TTRPGs, so I do think it's worth noting this if you do prefer more minimal setups, or if you don't really love the slowdown of having newer players needing to double check what uses what dice, because I can see that being a bigger issue for new players. Another minor downside was that it has kind of this generalist fantasy feel. Again, this is pretty nitpicky and not necessarily even an issue. I just felt that the classes and subclasses in particular felt a little generic. They're definitely targeting the heroic fantasy feel we all know and love. I just feel like a lot of the creativity skewed towards the ancestries and domain features, and I would have liked a little bit more of it to shine through in these options. And again, honestly, for me, this isn't a big deal. I just think it's a missed opportunity from a group of very creative people. I would have liked at least a few sparkly options. Yeah, I just really want to know what sort of niche stuff they would like to see in games. And who knows, as they release more frames or setting books, they might have more unique choices that are coming out as time goes on. I might be jumping the gun on this one a little bit. But now, for the most important part, what mechanic would I steal and shamelessly apply to my D&D games at home? For this system, it would definitely be Daggerheart's death rules. See, I have a problem. You know how I said that I'm a low roller when I play? Yeah. Not when I DM. It's like my dice store up all of their frustration and malice and then take it all out on my poor unsuspecting players. My little angel babies. But a weird offhand squirrel encounter can turn into a TPK in no time, and I just have to sit there like... And trust me, I have no qualms about killing PCs in grittier systems like Shadow Dark or Mothership. But when we play something like 5e, where a player might have spent 5 hours crafting the perfect himbo warlock and interconnecting them with the other players, dumb dice luck shouldn't ruin that. Deaths that come about this way aren't really fun or satisfying in these more heroic, character-driven games. They're just not. So I really love what Daggerheart does here. They put the drama of life and death back into the player's hands. Yeah, keep me out of this shit, guys. Mom's not home. So here's how it works. When a player loses their last HP point, they have to make a death move. This means they can do one of 3 options. They can take a more traditional stance and risk it, so you'd roll your duality dice, and if the hope number was higher, you're back up, and if the fear is higher, you're dead. I'm also pretty sure this is one roll, so you can avoid death. You just drop unconscious. But you do, however, roll your fear die. And if that number is equal to or lower than your character's level, you gain a scar. And I'll talk more about scars in just a second because last but not least, we have Blaze of Glory, an option clearly invented for me, just me. Thanks, Darrington. I actually got to go out in a blaze of glory during the one-shot. It was great. So with this option, it's you embracing your end and taking one last action before you die. And that action is an automatic critical success. So you can potentially do a lot of damage on your way out. And what I love about this is none of these options feel like get out of jail free cards. They feel like choices with weight. They're not, you rolled bad, now you're dead. And they're not, haha, JK, hand-wavy stuff. They're, okay, what story do you want to tell with this? So, if a chaotic player really wants to go out in a blaze of glory after a squirrel interaction encounter gone wrong, they can still do that, whatever that looks like. But this gets rid of those unfulfilling narrative moments without removing stakes. I think this is one of those areas where it leaves a lot of room to play with if you are porting it into your D&D games or into other systems. So for a more hardcore mode game, I think you could definitely have automatic scars if someone's taking the avoid death option. I think you could play with scar consequences because scars aren't just like narrative flavor in Daggerheart. They encourage giving it a narrative component, but you permanently lose a hope slot, and that's kind of a big deal. So there are mechanical implications to this. But for D&D, I think you can play with something like losing a spell slot, limiting the use of an ability that's affected by proficiency bonus, or even something like permanent disadvantage in a specific skill. You could also play with more narrative disadvantages. Fabula Ultima is actually a system that has death mechanics that are pretty similar to Daggerheart. Their options include surrendering, surviving, and dying. So maybe a player can choose from a small list of consequences or roll on a small table. So do they get kidnapped? Do they get infected by a werewolf bite? That sort of thing, something tailored to the game you're playing. I just think it's a really good opportunity to flesh out cool options that actually make sense in your game and to create consequences for characters that feel interesting to your players. Another riff that I was mulling over with another player at the event was possibly taking the avoid death option off the table for major boss battles, obviously talking it over with your group first. But that way these types of battles still feel a lot more final and a lot more important in that heightened way. But yeah, overall, really like these death rules. I like that it encourages the roleplay aspect for PCs who've survived harrowing events, having them come up with a physical scar, a painful memory, or a deep fear, something like that, but also marrying it to mechanical consequences. And then you get to shove it all right back to the player and go, you pick. I dig it. But don't go running off to die gloriously just yet, because this week is the Dungeon Tubers Dungeon Jam. Go check out everybody's amazing 5-room dungeon videos. I've linked to the playlist below. In fact, you might even recognize a certain someone if you pop over to Val of Corkboard and Curiosity's video, because honestly, like, she knocked it out of the park. Out of the park! Ball game over! Seriously though, Naigobi and Dadia of Mystic Arts DM did an amazing job of putting this event together. I didn't quite finish my Dungeon Jam submission, because if you know anything about web dev job hunts, you'll know that they're a full-time job by themselves. But who knows, maybe I'll do a retroactive video soon. But luckily for you, there's a ton of great content across that playlist, so I'm sure you won't get too bored. And if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to check out these ones next.